Hi Frank, we're going to talk about the 5 big foreigner bubble cities for 2020. Where are those going to be?
Well, and big refers to the size of the bubble. Incidentally, we did make a video called Crime Spikes Abroad against foreigners. And so the premise of this video is along the lines of that video. So if you haven't watched that one, we recommend that you do watch that one. And so these bubbles, they definitely have a method to them where they are in a vicious cycle scenario. Obviously, these cities are in totally separate, different countries, and cultures are very much different from one another. So they aren't going to cookie cutter appear exactly the same, especially in areas that already had some crime. And by the time the bubble gets to its vicious part of the cycle, they're going to get real bad, like in Santo Domingo and in Mexico. And other places in Latin America, whereas maybe in Portugal or places in Europe, they won't get that bad, but they'll still spike and they'll still be notable. One thing about crime, though, is that it's generally the news of crime is suppressed. We have ways of ferreting out and accessing that, and it is part of our program of helping people to become more self-sufficient and retiring earlier and better and knowing more about the places they want to go. So here are the cities. Lisbon, Portugal is, it's in that part where the prices are still in the frothy mode. It hasn't yet reached the...
So they're going to go even higher, the prices.
The prices are going to keep going higher. Now, it doesn't mean that the really high prices will keep going higher. It means that the prices will go higher in areas that haven't gone higher yet.
Yeah, because expats start branching out.
They start branching out because they
can't afford it.
They're told, oh, you can live cheap, and it turns out that you can't. But if you go out here, then it's easier. So the prices are still in that spot, although they're pretty high right now in the big cities and in the Algarve compared to what they were before, because remember, that's a relative term. High, low is all relative depending on where you're coming from. But we always reference it back to what the local prices were before. All right, so that's where Lisbon's at. The next city...
Medellin.
Medellin has been pumped for going on at least 8 years that I can remember, maybe even close to a decade. Colombia had a stigma attached to it from the really bad times in the 80s. And a lot of these Latin countries have that, by the way. It's not just Colombia. Colombia was in the news because of the big drug guy and all that, but there's a lot of stuff going on in a lot of other places all over Latin America all the time that's similar. The thing is that Medellin, because of that, has taken a little longer, but it's now coming into its own. The prices have already been really frothy and spiking in a specific RAM promoted area of Medellin, especially in that area. It's at a point now where the crime rates are now starting to show up. They're just slowly. And remember, the crime rates can show up slowly. It can start out with just more street crime and then more home invasions.
That's how it started out with Cuenca. I remember it was always like people pulling off jewelry as you're walking down the street.
More street crime and then more violent
snatching your cell phone. And then several years later it became home invasions.
Yeah, there's a stepping way that it happens.
Well, so what are prices doing? Did you say what they were doing in Medellin?
The prices in a specific RAM promoted area of El Poblado have gone higher and higher. Again, the prices have room to branch out from that area, but because it's a really big city, they may not, and so it may stay focused on that, or it may branch out. But I think that in time they will branch out. It just may take a lot longer.
I think a lot of foreigners are afraid to really branch out.
Well, and for good reason.
Yeah.
And especially once the rich foreigner label is attached and you're profiled that way as a foreigner, it's bad. It's bad for everyone. You know, everybody else that comes after you that doesn't act like you, unfortunately gets labeled as one of you, you know, because you look like them. Unless you go outside of their area and you get to know the locals and you stay on a local level and you know, like that. So, okay, and you stay away from those bubbles. Okay, so next city.
Cuenca.
Cuenca, Ecuador. Cuenca, Ecuador is not at the top. It was at the top. It did go through the cycle and it went bust, and now it's starting to pick up once again, and it will go back through the cycle. But it is right at the bottom of the U, turning around, so it's got a ways to go before any of the worst part of the vicious cycles start showing up. However, I do have to say this, because it's the second time around, it may happen quicker. It may happen quicker just because the scenario's been seen before. So,
I for some reason, I think that people going to Ecuador have a little bit more savvy for some reason, and I think it's because a lot of them, I think they still follow us or followed us, and they're a little bit more savvy and might go a little bit more towards the local pricing level, though.
Hundreds of videos on Cuenca, Ecuador, and Ecuador in general. So
yes,
there's a lot of information. There's a lot more down-to-earth information about Ecuador on our channel. Next.
Santo Domingo.
Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic, has already surpassed its top of the bubble prices. You know this already because it was in the news, and it's had its vicious part of its cycle show up in the crime spikes already. So it's actually in the middle of the vicious crime spike, and of course once it becomes news that the crime is spiking, then it's sort of a self-fulfilling thing where the bubble starts deflating, because people, once they see it in the news, then it's like, well, they don't want to go there.
What do you mean it was in the news? They don't know.
Well, there were several reports of some pretty violent crimes.
Against, crimes and stuff.
Against
okay.
foreigners, and on top of that, people getting, you know, drugged and all kind of violent crimes against just tourists and stuff. So, and even people that live there. And you know, you got things going on that have been going on for years. Things like, and if you don't know this, we've made videos about the DR. There's people in Santo Domingo that their earnings are $200 a month, and then you've got people like from Washington D.C. coming up, buying up property, and these are just boxy apartments that they're just nothing special, but they're putting $1,500, $2,000 a month on them, you know. And this is right next door or in the same city with people that are working all month long to make $200. So yeah, this is just a cause and effect. It's just something we talked about in the other video on the crime spikes against foreigners. Next city. Now, we're not trying to say these are the only places that are bubbling in the world. We are focusing on places that are promoted by the Rams, and because they have a clear history of going through the vicious cycle we've discussed in another video, and therefore that doesn't mean there aren't other areas in the world that are not also bubbling. Okay, and the next one is a smaller place, and it's similar to other smaller places that have also gone through the vicious cycle we talked about in the other video. The thing about these smaller places is the cycle tends to not last quite as long because there's less people, and so once they flee, it kind of dies down really quick. So there's not like this large population of people that needs to, over a period of a year or two, you know, start leaving. So, or not just leaving, but recognize what's happening. And so Lake Chapala, Mexico. Now Mexico in itself is a large country, and Americans have been going to Mexico for 3 decades. So that means there's a lot of Americans in Mexico, and that also means that there's going to be a variety of different cities where there's a high number of Americans or gringos or what have you. However, there are spots that are flaring up at the moment and bubbling at the moment, just depending on how many bloggers and that kind of thing. So Lake Chapala is the place where now the prices have pretty much topped out, and the reports of crime have started to trickle out a little bit. you know, and then again, just like Vilcabamba, Ecuador, when the crime rates really got going, they got pretty bad. But again, then it just quieted down fairly quickly. But you know, people. Okay, so yeah, Mexico's got different cities. So any one of the cities could be, you know, at any stage of the bubble. So was there a city that we left out? Is there a city that you might want to know about? Is there something you know about some other city that might be somewhere on this vicious cycle? Let us know in the comments, and thanks for staying with us. You know what to do.
Ciao.
See you later.